is God both one person and three, you don't understand Christian theology, because that is not what Christian theology or the doctrine of the Trinity, which is what you're referring to, actually says. What Christian theology says and what the doctrine of the Trinity teaches is that God is three distinct and separate persons, but one nature, one essence. So it is not an incoherence, it is not a logical contradiction because of that fact. The doctrine of the Trinity is referring to two separate categories, persons and nature. So a person could also be understood as a center of consciousness, a mind, a center of a will, and then a nature can also be an essence. And so they are two separate things. There is only one God, there is only one being in the universe who has this essence, God. That is his nature. There is one God, but yet he exists in three separate and distinct centers of consciousness, the Father and the Son and the Spirit. So it is three centers of consciousness, three minds, three separate and distinct wills in one essence, in one nature, in one substance. So I think that that's just due to a misunderstanding that you have of Christian theology and Christian doctrine, but you're not a Christian, so that's understandable, so it's no big deal. But just to make the point that it's not illogical, it's not incoherent, it's philosophically very, very logical, and it does cohere. And then you say this comment, math, constants, ugh, dude, my advice is go with faith. I don't really understand why you said that, because you haven't answered the question. I mean, if math and these physical constants of nature exist in the cosmos, in physics, and they have finely tuned our universe, that begs for an explanation. You can't just simply shrug it off and say, ugh, go with faith. I am, in a sense, going with faith. I am trusting what I know to be true. I know that math and these type of mathematical concepts and fine-tuning and design comes from a mind. So based upon what I already know to be true from my common sense experience in everyday life, the inference to the best explanation says that the fine-tuning of the laws of physics is due to an all-intelligent mind and designer. So that's why I put my faith, my trust in that. It's not blind faith. Biblical faith is trusting in what you know to be true from evidence and experience. And so that's why I place my faith in an all-intelligent creator and God. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I don't have enough faith to believe that a finely tuned universe in over 30 mathematical quantities could arise through necessity or chance. I don't have enough faith to believe that. So you must have more faith than I do. So that's all I meant when that would be my response to when you said math and constants. And then you said morality. Well, again, I'm not referring to the issue of whether God is moral or not. That is, again, another red herring fallacy here. You're distracting the topic, possibly without realizing it. I'm simply referring to the fact that morality does exist, and in this video on Christianity's compatibility, that the Christian worldview is compatible with the existence of objective morality, and that's all that I was saying. So, and also, just to give you some information, in Jeremiah 19:9, what God is referring to when he says, I will cause them to eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, what he's referring to is a prediction of the Babylonian nation coming down from the north and invading Israel and taking them captive to Babylon. This happened, I think the first captivity was in 586 BC, and this happened 3 times. The last one was in 605 BC. Nebuchadnezzar led them back to Babylon. There were 3 separate attacks, and they were led away into captivity, the southern 2 tribes of Israel. And all he's referring to is that during these sieges, that the nation of Israel was going to be in such bad condition is that they would resort to cannibalism, and they would eat the flesh of their sons and their daughters. So it's not that God made them do this or anything. When he says, I will cause them to eat the flesh of their sons, God is not making them do this. They have free will. They have chosen to do it. But God is bringing the nation of Babylon down. This is a prophecy, by the way, so you have to answer that question. How did it come to pass? How could it come to pass? The Lord predicted it in advance through the prophet Jeremiah, and it actually happened, as I said, 3 times in history. So that begs the question, how is it possible that this prophetic prediction of the future could even actually take place, in which it did? But if you read the whole book of Jeremiah, not just that verse or that chapter, God is using Babylon as a tool of correction against Israel. And that situation, they would besiege Jerusalem due to Jerusalem's disobedience and so forth. They brought it upon themselves. God told them not to go against Babylon, etc. And it would result, unfortunately, in the Israelites themselves choosing to go into cannibalism, which was a horrible, horrible point. Again, all I was referring to was the existence of morality, math, the physical constants of nature, and logic is compatible with the Christian worldview. Not with atheism, for example, not with Buddhism and some other religions out there. So let me just pose some questions to you, Dan, in the time that I have left. Number one, you're an atheist, so I assume you believe in naturalism, that the only thing that exists is the physical body, nothing beyond that, no immaterial realities. But question, Dan, how do you explain the existence of immaterial or abstract objects such as numbers, concepts, ideas, consciousness, and logic? How do you explain the existence of these things if you are a naturalist? Maybe you're not a naturalist, but if you are, as most atheists tend to be, how do you explain the existence of these immaterial and abstract objects? Because if even just one of them is real, if one of these immaterial abstract objects exists in reality, and I would add to the list free choice, which you are exercising as you watch this video, Dan, then naturalism is false. So I'd like to hear your answer to that. How do you explain the existence of those immaterial realities according to naturalism? Number two, as an atheist, you probably believe in scientism. And this just basically holds that science is the ultimate form of knowledge and the ultimate form of truth. It's also closely related to verificationism, which says that if something is not true by definition, or if it cannot be verified by the five senses, then it is not true. It is false. Problem is, verificationism fails its own standard for truth, because verificationism is not true by definition, and that statement cannot be verified by the five senses. But if you do believe that, Dan, which maybe you do not, but if you do believe in scientism, what do you say about knowledge that we do receive that is not provable by science? And I mean this type of truth. What do you say about conceptual truth, concepts? About aesthetic truth, like beauty? Or what about moral truth, objective morality and values? What do you say about mathematical truth? Or truth about memories? That is not provable by science, but yet we believe in that. What about the existence of other minds? That is not directly provable by science. That's something that we just naturally believe. It's called properly basic by philosophers. And then what about perceptual truth? We believe in the existence of an actual real world around us. As a matter of fact, science has to believe in that even to function. But that belief, that perceptual truth, the existence of the physical world around us, is not itself provable by science. So if you do believe in scientism, how do you explain these different forms of truth, these different forms of knowledge that can themselves not be proven by science, yet scientists believe in them? Number three, as an atheist, you probably believe in the Big Bang, but since we know that we live in a finely tuned universe that has a cause, if you do not believe that the universe was caused, then how do you think it came into being? Number one, was it uncaused? That goes against the law of causality. It's illogical. Number two, did it come about by necessity? Did it have to be this way? Because surely it didn't. We can think of plenty of other possibilities. Or number three, did it come about by chance? Which you might hold to that, but the statistical odds of that are so great, they go beyond mathematical possibility. So I'd like to hear your answer to that. How do you explain the existence of a finely tuned universe? And we basically know from 5 scientific reasons that the universe had a beginning, and 2 philosophical ones, and that the universe was caused. So I'd like to hear your answer to that. Question number 4. If you're an atheist, then you could probably have 2 views on morality. Number 1, you could be a moral relativist, which basically says that there is no absolute morality. It's all relative, and I would ask you, are you absolutely sure about that? You probably believe in relativism, period, which says there is no absolute truth, and I would just ask you, are you absolutely sure about that? Relativism is very self-defeating. Or, in terms of morality, you might consider yourself a moral nihilist, that you do not believe in any good or bad, right or wrong. You never make moral judgments of any kind. And I would ask you just honestly, if you do consider yourself a moral nihilist, are you consistent with that? Because if that's true, then you can never, ever in your life consistently make statements of meaning, value, or purpose. But I'm sure that you probably do. I'm sure that you probably do believe in moral values. But then where do moral values come from? Where do they find their foundation? The most logical train of thought that I can think of is that moral laws cannot exist without a moral lawgiver. Moral laws do exist, therefore a moral lawgiver must exist. I'd like to hear your response to that. And fifthly, if you're an atheist, you probably believe in Darwinian evolution. It's usually the scientific backbone, supposedly, of atheism. So here's a couple questions to throw out. According to Darwinian evolution, how would you explain the origin of the first cell? Spontaneous generation doesn't really cut it, and modern atheistic cell theory cannot advance back beyond the first cell. They just say that it's basically a mystery. But you need to explain this, because any adequate worldview explains origins. And so how does Darwinian evolution explain the origin of the first cell? What were the mechanics of how non-living chemicals actually organized, self-organized, and were animated, became life, and became that first living cell? The incredible complexity of the cell and so forth, it's just mathematically impossible. So I'd like an explanation of how that happened. How do you explain chicken and egg systems within the cell? In other words, we need proteins to make DNA, but the cell needs DNA to make proteins. You need them both simultaneously. How do you explain that? How did that evolve? Number two, how do you explain the irreducible complexity that we see within the cell? That, for example, you have certain parts that if you strip away any one single protein part, the whole system is useless. You need all of the parts together functioning at the same time. This is called irreducible complexity. It's popularized by Michael Behe in his book Darwin's Black Box. So how do you explain irreducibly complex systems within the cell? And then lastly, how do you explain the origin of information? The DNA molecule is basically the holy grail of biological sciences these days. And it is not like a language, it is an actual language, which I'm sure you're aware of more than 3 billion pairs of chemical letters. It's an error-correcting, digital, redundant, overlapping information storage and retrieval system, more advanced than any language information storage and retrieval system, any program that we have. How do you explain the origin of not only the hardware of the DNA molecule, because we cannot build it. It's too complex for us with our engineering knowledge of molecular science to reconstruct the hardware. But even more mysterious, how do you explain the information, the origin of the information in DNA? Information is an immaterial quality. How do you explain the origin of the language? We know that language and information comes from a mind, comes from an author. All computer programs come from a programmer. Question is, who is the programmer that programmed all of biological life on planet Earth? It all seems to run on the same program, DNA. So, a couple of questions for you, Dan. I really enjoyed, Dan, your comments. Thank you very much. If you want to answer some of these questions, that'd be great. Let's keep it respectful. Let's keep it, very polite. No ad hominems, things like that. And let's just honestly search for the answers. It'll be a great exercise for you and me, and hopefully entertaining and maybe even educational for some folks that might be watching it. Okay, so Danmill23, look forward to talking with you, man. Thanks for your comments, and God bless everybody that's watching. Talk to you soon. Check out intelligentfaith315.com. Till next time.